If you've never been to Rome, someday when we're able to do things like travel again, we should all go together, because Rome is just this crazy, magnificent, amazing thing that there is art and architecture and food. Don't forget about the food, and Vespas and religion and history, and it's one of those places where even crossing the street is an adventure. Right? You go there, and this is a remarkable thing. But what's really amazing, at least for me, about Rome, about being in Rome, is that there you have laid out for you really two ideas. Two ideas that sometimes bump off each other, mingle with each other, and on occasion are in conflict with each other. And these ideas are illustrated by, as you walk down Rome, going down Rome, you know that the dust that's on your feet isn't the same dust as on Julius Caesar's feet or Augustus's feet or Tiberius's feet, but it's not hard to imagine, because you go down a little street and there at a corner is a column that one of them happened to put up. There it is, standing there all on its own, this column, this Roman column right there, 2,000 years old. And on the other corner is one of hundreds of churches where some ancient saint preached or died or is buried right there, right in juxtaposition with each other, standing there together. And as you kind of walk through Rome, you see this sort of mingling between the majesty that was Rome, the power that was Rome, and the church, and this idea that's Christianity. And there they are, kind of moving through each other. And if you're in Rome, and if we go together, there's at least 5 things that we would go to together. There's the Roman Forum, the remains of the Roman Forum, which was the center of Roman life, of business and religion and politics and government and power, all mingled right in there. The sites of power and religion and commerce and entertainment, all right there. And then not too far from that is the Colosseum. We've all seen pictures of the Colosseum. We all know what that is, that great amphitheater where the government mingled entertainment and politics and power and self-exaltation and all of those things that went on in that arena. And then 3 churches in particular. 3 churches in particular. One, St. John Lateran, which was the first public church in Rome, and in its baptistry built over the site where some small persecutions took place, where Constantine himself had been baptized, and even where the great eastern doors going into the church are the doors of the ancient Roman Senate, literally mingling the old and the new. And then, of course, St. Peter's, which is built over top of the bones of the apostle himself, and then St. Paul's outside the walls, where the bones of St. Paul himself are kept. And you go to these, right, and you see this mingling of ancient and new ideas. And we remember these things on this day, on remembering June 29th, which is the feast day of Saints Peter and Paul, the traditional date when both of those apostles were martyred for their faith. And when we remember that story and we wander through Rome, it's important to remember that when Peter and Paul died, they were not stained glass images. In fact, when Peter and Paul died, they were insignificant players in an insignificant religion that that they died, these two, one from a backwaters place in the empire, the other one an itinerant tent maker and preacher of a Roman subject, legally murdered by the government. And yet here in this city is the mingling of this idea of this religion of marginalized people and the might and power of history merged right together in this place. And we see them playing themselves out with each other, against each other, in coordination with each other through the past 2,000 years. Right? This power and this new thing that has its beginnings in the lives not of the powerful, but the lives of the marginalized. Today we read these lessons these traditional lessons for the feast day of Saints Peter and Paul, and they speak, right? They speak of the faithfulness of Peter, the faithfulness of Paul, the transformation of Peter into the disciple of the beauty of forgiveness and reconciliation with God. But there is one more verse that I think they would even agree that we should add to it, that if you remember back there on that day when God unleashed the Spirit in Jesus' name on the world, Peter himself preached this sermon, maybe the most important sermon ever preached. And he stood up and he talked about what God was doing in the world. And as he was talking about it, Peter was remembering one of God's long-gone prophets, and he said these words, that it was God's wish that the day would come when young people would see visions and old people would dream dreams. And to understand that which mingles together in Rome, to understand what the church is really after, to understand that, and to understand it in the lives of characters like Peter and Paul and any of the countless hosts of God, is to understand that one little verse, that young people will see visions and old people will dream dreams. And every time the church gets itself in trouble is usually around the time that we forget that our business in the world is to see visions of things that seem improbable, to dream dreams that seem just to be nothing other than dreams. And when we forget that that's what our job is, that seeing something in the world that nobody else can see, of imagining that it can be possible in God, is the time everybody forgets about us. Because what are we but a place where those who sit on the edge of this world imagine that the world in God can be something different. To imagine for just a moment that our lives mean more than we think they do. To imagine and believe that in us God works transformation and reconciliation and renewal of the world. That we, as God's people, are here on purpose, and with a purpose, and for a purpose. There is, and always has been, And when you stand in Rome, you can imagine 2,000, 2,500 years of this, that there is always disruption. There is always bad things happening to people who live their lives on the margins because they have been counted as irrelevant and unimportant. And that is the moment for our story to become part of that story. That our moment was for this moment. That as we look over the chaos of our world, as we think about what's happening around us, as we hear the voices of our friends and our neighbors who say to us, "How long for me?" it's the moment of imagining a new world, to see visions and to dream dreams. And to remember that God placed us here to see visions and to dream dreams and to feel uncomfortable in this world so that we would see new visions and dreams and to imagine our lives in ways that inspire visions and dreams. And if those visions and dreams take hundreds of years, that we commit ourselves to making them real, that we commit ourselves to believing that God calls us into those things. Because for Peter and for Paul, who did not see Rome as the center of their faith, but who did see an image and a vision of a dream of what the world could look like in God, and pass that vision and dream on to us for this moment, in this community, in this country, in this world now. We cannot be content to look at the world and simply hope, but to look at the world and imagine something new. And as they worked for something new, to know that God calls us to that very image. As we go through this day, we're thankful for our colleague, Pastor Haller, who over a lot of years has helped us in this place see visions and dream dreams, who in this place was a pioneer of ministry in a community that didn't always understand what it meant for people who had been excluded from ministry and the public work of that ministry to be a witness to that. And this church that could work through that our work and our ministry and our vision of something is of something new, of a new vision of how God works in this world. And so even, dare we say, it took a long time maybe for us to fully live into or begin to imagine living into a vision of how women could speak of the gospel. We now say we imagine how even other things could happen with us because of God's presence, because that is the thing that Peter and Paul and all of those other apostles, of the Virgin Mary and those women who stood by Jesus, of all of those great saints who came before us, who saw visions of a world in God that could be, and dreamed that dream until it became real. As we leave and go from our homes and wherever we are today into this place, as we leave that to say, how will God use our lives? How will God use our church? How will God use the presence of Jesus among us to change this world, no matter how long it takes, to stand with those who cry out for a new vision and say that they have a dream of how God's world goes. As we grasp hands with Peter and Paul and all of those apostles and stretch our hands out into this community, may our lives, our spirit, and our vision be of one that is of renewal, of peace, and God's grace. May it be so here with us, with our city, until it is part of God's world. Amen.